Welcome back to Money Moves. Got another great episode for you guys. Fast and furious. Lots of topics to dig in on today. As you guys know, politics is front and center. Unfortunately, it seems to be driving me nuts right now. As much as I would love to put my head in the sand and not have to hear from all of the insanity on all sides going on right now, it's one of those things where it's like a car crash. You just can't look away from it. You want to know what's going on. You want to see all the details, even though it makes you cringe as you actually get up close and personal with it. This week, we've got the assassination of Hamas leader Ismael Haniyeh. The leader of Hamas has been assassinated in Iran in the capital of Tehran. I think that's overall a big win for Team Human and the world when you talk about just pure evil and individuals that are out there playing, a game with other people's lives. It's pretty sad. And obviously, I'm not going to take any stance or side on Palestine or Israel. But when you see someone of that caliber of evil being eradicated off of planet Earth, I am not upset about it. We've got Donald Trump planning to do a major interview with Elon Musk on Monday. We've got Kamala Harris, who came out this week and picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for VP. And this is 2 weeks since Kamala has been selected, which is kind of weird that she's done 0 interviews, 0 press conferences, or unscripted media events, minus this one event that it then was leaked and came out that she paid a bunch of rappers and influencers to be there. And they were twerking on stage, and obviously on the Trump rallies, right? He doesn't pay anybody to be there, and he just sells these arenas out. And his soundtracks are "I'm Proud to Be an American," and you got Kamala Harris and Megan Thee Stallion talking about what's going down in between her legs. It's just weird. It's weird. And speaking of weird, it's funny how they have now started to, the left, brand the right as weird. And I guess if being pro-family, advocating for child tax credits, not wanting Christianity to be mocked, opposing men being in women's sports, opposing gender mutilation for minors and not allowing that, let alone not allowing that without parental consent, wanting the border secure, wanting to fight crime and make crime illegal again, being anti-war and not wanting to send all of my tax-paying dollars over to wars that are not benefiting us when we have a lot of issues here stateside. Loving my country, I guess that makes me weird. But I just thought that was kind of funny. The people that are doing a bunch of weird shit politically are the ones that are now saying things about these individuals. And I haven't done too much digging on this Tim Walz guy. But I do know that obviously as the governor of Minnesota, while Minneapolis, after the George Floyd riots, straight up burned to the ground, he stalled on deploying the National Guard for, I think, at least a day or a couple days, and blaming the city that they didn't have the right paperwork. His daughter, I guess there were some stories about his daughter leaking the National Guard's deployment and kind of trying to give insights and tactical information to rioters and protesters on how to avoid them, how to loot the city. That was really weird. His wife made some really random comments about sleeping with their windows open. There's an interview of her saying that she's sleeping with the windows open so she could smell the burning rubber and the chaos that was going on outside. And again, I'm not one to look into words. Obviously, it's very easy for people to manipulate words. You see how they do it with Trump soundbites all the time, or J.D. Vance's soundbites now of saying one thing in some small sentence, and then they clip it because it sounded a little weird or maybe off, and now all of a sudden you see the whole video play out, which they don't show you, and the context that it creates to that one particular statement, and you're like, oh, God, why are they running with this? And obviously you know why they're running with it. They're trying to make that person look bad. And I know that the right does it on those on the left as well. So I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, reading into a little bit more information. I do know that just after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, he called Trump and his supporters fascists, egging on the same rhetoric that led to him obviously being shot in the first place, which was very dangerous for all parties. He has been one of the big leaders in the most radical youth trans surgery laws in the country. So, Y'all know how I feel about that. He's allowing teenagers without parental consent to do these things. I know that he's on immigration, at least, saying that he wants to make it easier for people to come in, and of the same stance that Kamala is of free health care and a lot of the things that I think are good debate topics and discussions. I know that he approved $500 million in hero pay for frontline workers, only to have 40% of that money go to people who were ineligible, in many cases literally deceased. So there's some weird controversy around that. I know that you all know how I feel about Pelosi. He was Pelosi's sidekick and did whatever the Democrats demanded in a lot of areas, which again, this is politics, folks. So I'm trying to be as unbiased as I possibly can, but trying to understand a little bit more about who this dude is, just as I've been kind of trying to do the same thing around JD Vance. And he's got some interesting past comments and stances, but an interesting journey to the White House, or at least into politics. A lot more decorated, a lot more, I would say, America focused. And obviously as a military vet and somebody that served in the Marines, went to law school, and really just grinded his ass off to get in the position that he's in today, I probably align with one a little bit more than the other. But that being said, we are heating up and things aren't going to continue to cool off anytime soon as we get to the election. And debt is something that continues to be a big issue for America and for Americans. We saw a pretty disturbing headline this week that the Biden-Harris administration mistakenly sent $239 million in U.S. aid to the Taliban due to inadequate vetting by the State Department. They've even talked about having ledger mistakes and misappropriating $6 billion. You heard that correctly. So just some totally egregious leadership when it comes to managing our budget. And obviously we've seen that inflate pretty significantly over the last few years of this administration. As of today, we saw household debt increased moderately in Q2 of 2024. The report shows that total household debt increased by $109 billion, 0.6%. So, about 60 basis points in Q2, up to $17.8 trillion. Now, the stock market has been pretty bumpy over the course of the last few days. And you guys know I'm not going to speak as an expert in this particular topic, as Mr. Breedwell is flying home as we speak right now from his little vacay out in Europe. What we did see over a 72-hour period was $2.9 trillion get wiped out of the market. And as of Monday, $1.4 trillion in the market was wiped out. But, and I know Trump isn't going to like this because he was touting the Kamala crash and Trump and his one-liners on his tweets, basically trying to point blame over to Kamala, and that's what they do in their political tactics. So can't hate the man for playing the game, because I know obviously they're doing the same thing on his side. Anytime you get some ammo, you got to pull that trigger and fire when you're in war, essentially, when we're talking about the campaign trail. But the S&P 5 actually recovered pretty nicely and is now up 2.4% today and on track for its best daily performance of the year. The index is now up nearly 4% from its low seen yesterday. That's $1.8 trillion of market cap added back to the S&P 500 since yesterday's low, as well as the NASDAQ 100 had nearly 1,000 points in from its low seen yesterday. I was reading an article because so many people, right, are freaking out, and I know that I reached out to Breedwell and was like, hey, did you guys see this coming? Did you account for a pullback? Obviously, I know you're always Mr. Perma Bull, but you also got to account for, and based on your client's specific needs and goals, risk and volatility that comes in with these bull runs. There's generally some pullbacks. Was there any rotation, repositioning? And as his response was, as always, yes, there was, and he's put money into the market. I am as well. Many others are as well. And this article went on to say, what do you do when there is volatility in the market? Well, if you are somebody that has a long-term mindset, then you dollar cost average your way through the market to mitigate some of your position, to mitigate some of your downside. Maybe you rotate out of some things that might be a little bit higher risk into some things that have a little bit more moderate growth or more insulation to downside, and diversify a little bit during this time. And that's really it, right? That's the game that we play. Therefore, statistically, and the probability of these things happening at some point is all going to be a part of the timeline of your investing journey. And therefore, you just got to ride through these. You got to stay on the horse. The challenge that I see and hear from many people that get fearful is they pull their money out of the market, they cash up, and not only do they potentially miss out on the upside, and we'll just say this, for example, S&P now 2.4% today. This is Tuesday as I'm recording this, and 1.8 trillion of market cap added back in within 24 hours of the S&P 500 low. If you were to cash up, live in fear, not only are you now going to be paying taxes on that, but you just missed out on all of the opportunity and the retrace back up that happened the following day. So that's why you really can't read the headlines. You can't buy into the emotion, the highs and the lows of this roller coaster that we're riding on, and just trust in the fact that you're on this ride for the long haul. And so the twists and the turns and the drops and the spikes, those are all a part of the ride and the journey, and you just got to enjoy it. I always think of when I was having a conversation with one of my mentors, and we went over to a buddy of his who lived in this insane house. I've never been in a house this big, to be completely honest. And he sold his insurance firm for $1.8 billion. And one of the things that he said that has always resonated with me is, if you want to get rich and you want to make lots of money, volatility is the price you're going to pay in order to get there. And it's just one of those things where, as you are in the market longer, you start to desensitize yourself to those emotional highs and lows. When you're winning big and you're like, oh my gosh, I had a massive quarter, you don't get as excited because there's probably going to be some kind of pullback at some point, right? And you don't get as low when those things happen, but you do know and trust in the fact that there's going to be peaks and valleys along the way. And you're going to start down here, and eventually, even though there's going to be a lot of upticks and a lot of downticks, that in the long run, you're going to end up way up there. And that's what you have to mentally prepare yourself for, and that's what you have to physically discipline yourself for, to do the right things when things are going good, and most importantly, when things are going bad. So we'll get Mr. Breedwell's take on what we can see over the course of the next few weeks, but we do know that based on the FOMC last week, that the Fed is starting to signal a lot more openly that we are going to be expecting a cut in September. The market has baked in a couple. Now, if they are going to get a little bit more aggressive based on next week's reports, which is PPI and CPI, then that will really be a big teller as to how aggressive, how fast, how slow, how non-aggressive they're going to be when it comes to rate cuts. And I am very interested to see what Jerome Powell's remarks are this week after we get some of those reports in. So we'll be definitely keeping an eye on that, but we are definitely in for a rate cut here very soon. And I know a lot of people are excited about that. A lot of people need that. When you think about, let me pull up and see where we got our federal funds rate. So as of right now, the federal funds rate is at 5.33%. And it's been holding there for pretty much since August of last year. Yep, it was 5.12 in July of last year, 5.33, and then it's been sitting there flat all the way into August of this year. And so when you think about, coming back to some of those earlier statements, the amount of household debt that people are holding, the amount of credit card debt that people are holding, right? A lot of the relief that people are waiting for is going to start with some relief in that federal funds rate. And that's going to start to tip and the scales and at least knock over the domino that could potentially start knocking down other dominoes that could equate to some easing in the financial markets and availability to capital for people that really need it, whether that's in commercial real estate, whether that's just somebody paying off their credit cards, whether that is with interest rates that have to do with houses needing to get refinanced or new people buying houses. We've been in this very interesting plateau and stalemate of a market in a lot of ways, in which was by design to really slow things down to combat inflation. And a lot of people are waiting whether or not that is going to be something that the Fed takes aggressive action on, moderate action on, or no action on come September. I think you know where we stand and where we expect to see rates at from a cut perspective, 1 at a minimum, 3, hopefully through the remainder of the year. But that'll be something that is going to be absolutely necessary to accomplish this quote unquote soft landing that we keep hearing of. Now, based on what happened with the stock market earlier this week, based on what's been going on globally with a lot of the wars, with a lot of the tension that is continuing to rise, we have seen the VIX. The VIX is the volatility index, and the volatility index has been continuously increasing over the course of the last few weeks. And when we see that volatility index continuing to rise, that is obviously something that is leading into this pullback. And we're going to see hopefully some cuts come to ease some of that volatility. That being said, I know that a lot of investors and a lot of people that are in the market use the indicator, a recession indicator called the SOM rule. And this was created by Claudia Sahm, S-A-H-M. And essentially, it's a recession indicator that has been pretty accurate over the course of the time they've been tracking it. And when it gets over a certain threshold, that usually triggers and indicates within a certain time frame that the U.S. goes into a recession. Now, if I pull up the most recent GDP print, Q2 of 2024, April to June, was 2.8% in real GDP. So if we're going by the definition of what a recession is, 2 negative quarters of GDP, then we are still quite a ways away from there potentially being a recession. And obviously what the Fed does, how all that flushes through the system is going to play a major role here. But we did see that the SOM rule has crossed over that 50 basis point threshold, that 0.5 threshold that generally leads to a future recession coming in behind it. Goldman Sachs, as of this week, increased its prediction of a U.S. recession in the next 12 months up from 15 to 25%. But the U.S. yield curve has just turned positive for the first time since July of 2022, which is another positive indicator. So there's so many things that we're tracking and trying to make sense of that don't make sense, but do make sense all at the same time. This oxymoron of economic data that we're trying to sift through these days is very confusing for some. But I think one of the things that I always love and appreciate about Ryan is he's very good at kind of cutting through a lot of the clickbait and the noise and the things that don't matter that could be used as headlines and narrative to create some attention-seeking conversations, and really working through what really does matter and what does it really mean, and keeping a calm and level head on how we can navigate these times. And I think that's also going back to that one article, which is when you're holding and you're playing the long-term game, you can really start to look at things through a lens with a very long-term mindset and just remaining calm and not making any too rash decisions here. So we'll keep an eye on that. More reports coming out this week that we will continue to track. Let's see here. We've got we got manufacturing index this week, crude oil inventories, initial jobless claims, and then, as I mentioned earlier, on Thursday and Friday, producer price index and PPI, and consumer price index in CPI. Very big week of reports there. So we will have some more dialogue around that next week. We've got inventory levels of homes on the market are still about 33% below pre-pandemic averages. If you head over to Redfin to get the U.S. housing market report, which is a really great website that has, at least on the single family front, a lot of good insight. The median sales price is up 4% year over year, an average now of $442,000, which is still obviously very unaffordable for a lot of people around the U.S. based on their household income. The number of homes sold, 465,482. That is down almost 11.5% year over year. So we can see the velocity at which the market is moving has definitely slowed a lot, even though there is still a healthy amount of demand per the amount of inventory that is available. So we'll be continuing to keep some eyes on that. San Francisco still has the highest office vacancy rate among large U.S. metro areas at more than 36%, according to data compiled by CBRE, which is one of the largest commercial real estate brokerage firms. We saw Twitter announce this week that they are exiting their headquarters in San Francisco. We saw Chevron say that they are leaving the state because of a lot of the egregious policy, non-business friendly policy. Texas is where they are looking to relocate their headquarters. Another hit to Gavin Newsom, rightfully so. So just a lot of interesting stuff to be kind of taking note on. Here's what I can tell you guys. There was a video that was sent to me earlier from one of my buddies, and it was kind of a soundbite mashup of, who was it? It was David Goggins. It was... Let me pull this up, and I'm going to just play it for you. So, this is a quick little video of Alex Hormozi, of, I believe, Andrew Tate, and David Goggins. And it's just talking about how can you get ahead in life right now? How can you win right now? How can you navigate the challenging times, the heavy times that it kind of feels like we're in right now? And when they want you to, because as you've heard Breedwell say, fear sells, fear gets clicks, fear's what ultimately is the attention grabbers. In times like right now, they want people to be fearful. They are tricking people into being soft. And when you think about that quote of good times make weak men, and it requires strong men to create good times, I think we can all agree on what side of the pendulum we're currently on right now. I mean, if you're born in the last 30, 40 years, we've lived in a pretty epic time because of a lot of the sacrifices and the challenges that future or previous generations, have overcome, all the sacrifices that they made to create those good times. And now we're starting to see a lot of weakness show up. Weakness in habits, weakness in disciplines, weakness in mindsets, weakness in all kinds of areas in men and women. And so I love this soundbite. I'm going to play it for you guys real quick.
It is so easy to beat people today. They are so soft. They have no work ethic. No one can stick with anything. Everyone's distracted. They're on social media. They're counting their fucking notifications because they can't stick with shit. They can't say no.
Because of that, there's never been more opportunity than there is right now. If you're a fucking savage and you get out there and you grind hard.
It's so easy to be great nowadays, my friend, because most people are weak. Most people don't want to go to that extra mile. Most people don't want to find that extra because it sucks. It's miserable. It's lonely. And that's where I gain the advantage.
So that just really resonated with me. It really resonated with me because at some point in your life, if you're not happy with where you're at, if you're not happy with the results that you're getting, at some point you got to be real with yourself about the gap between the life that you want to live, that you want to unlock, and the life that your mindset and your daily habits and your daily disciplines have created for you or are leading you towards. And if there's a major incongruency between, hey, if you want to be a millionaire, there's a certain set of habits and disciplines and the way your mind and your world and your days and your relationships and your health need to look if you want to get there. Same thing for somebody who wants to be worth 100 million. Somebody who wants to be the president of the United States, somebody that wants to be the best athlete in the world. You have to make sure that there's congruency between your mind, your body, your physical world, your relational world. And these are things that we just think are supposed to happen because we want them. And we've been trained and led to believe that everybody deserves to be a winner in life. And the reality is that just ain't true. There's beauty in duality. Without good, we wouldn't have bad. Without rich, we wouldn't have poor. Without light, we wouldn't have dark. Without sour, we wouldn't have sweet. And the duality in life allows us to appreciate the other one. If everything was sweet, if everything was rich, if everything was happy, and we didn't have any of those other contexts, then it would be a very one-dimensional way of thinking and enjoying and experiencing life. And if you want to be a winner, then you ultimately have to get out there and align yourself with all the things that are the opposite of what you don't want. And align yourself with all the things that are 100% congruent with the things that you do want and trust in that process. So if it has to do with money, if it has to do with your health, if it has to do with your relationships, your lifestyle, just think about that, right? You got to be real with yourself about the gap between the life that you want to live and the life your daily habits are leading you towards. Something to think about as we wrap up today, because I want to see all you guys winning at a really high level. And the one way that we can continue to do that is by challenging each other to think a little bit differently, to act a little bit better, to make some harder decisions, to do some of the things that you know you need to do in order to get there, and get in and put that work in. So hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the show, all I ask, take 60 seconds, leave a review on whatever platform you enjoy listening to this content on. These are the conversations and topics when it comes to money, to politics, to wealth building, your finances, that you got to be having. It's taboo for a lot of people to talk about these things, but what I can tell you is rich people, wealthy people, successful people, they're transparent, they're open, and they talk about these things consistently. And what you obsess over, eventually you can possess. Obsessions become possessions. And so make sure that you're obsessing about the right things in your life and in your business, and that by doing those things and being part of those conversations and being open-minded and staying curious and constantly learning and constantly top grading yourself, that you're going to ultimately end up in a completely different realm, a whole nother level of success, of happiness, of fulfillment than people who just take average and mediocrity as a default for their life. So thank you so much for tuning in. Until next week, keep investing in yourself and your wealth on your march to $1 million and beyond. We'll see you then.